A famous actress named Chris McNeil finds out that her daughter Regan is not acting like herself. Nothing like her regular self, actually. What happens to Regan? Well, let's read The Exorcist and find out. Welcome back to BG's Books. I'm Mr. BG, and today I will be reviewing The Exorcist by William Peter Blatty. So, similar to the Psycho book that I reviewed just last month, it was, of course, the basis for a very famous movie, The Exorcist was, and that movie was, of course, The Exorcist from 1973. And so The Exorcist book came out in 1971. And of course, it became really popular, and then it became a movie, and then that movie became a franchise. And I'm sure the rest of the story. They're still making Exorcist movies to this day. But I've actually never seen the Exorcist movie. I want to see it like either today or tomorrow or something, in the very near future. But for right now, I've just read the book, and wow, is it a wild ride. But in order to explain why it's a wild ride, I guess I should explain what The Exorcist is actually about. So, let's get into that. So, before the main story of The Exorcist actually starts, we have a brief prologue that's in northern Iraq, I think. And basically, all we need to know here is that a bunch of people are on like an archaeological dig site, some of which are priests, and then they discover a evil statue of the very evil demon Pazuzu. And so that's basically the prologue. But the main story of The Exorcist is about a famous actress named Chris McNeil, and currently she is on set with her daughter Regan and her assistants, spouses Carl and Willie, and her assistant Sharon. And she's also talking to her director Burke about doing stuff, stuff like that. But in the meantime, her daughter Regan is basically just your average, 11-year-old, almost 12-year-old, and stuff like that. But for whatever reason, Chris lets her play with a Ouija board. And for any of you who don't know, a Ouija board is basically a summoning circle for a demon, or it's like a board game designed to contact demons or something like that. So anyway, I think it's a little weird. Chris doesn't, and she finds out that Regan even has a little friend from this Ouija board whom she calls Captain Howdy, because she doesn't know the actual name of the friend she's talking to. So Chris is like, okay, that's cute and stuff, and that's cute. So basically stuff goes on, and as you can imagine, because it's called The Exorcist, some weird demon stuff starts happening. So stuff is normal for a little bit. Regan turns 12 years old, but then some really strange stuff starts happening. It's like Regan's skin just becomes like deathly pale, just unnaturally pale. Her heart rate is just not normal at all. Her eyes are really buggedy and weird. And then her voice just isn't herself, and even her face contorts into some weird stuff. So there's some very weird stuff going on. So Regan is like, what on earth is happening to Regan? So what she does is she goes to like a doctor, and she's like, okay, this, and like she lists all the stuff. And so the doctors come over, and Chris occasionally takes Regan over to the doctor, and they do a lot of tests on her, like an abnormal amount of tests, and like they do brain scans, can't find anything. They give her a bunch of medications, nothing changes. So they're just like, okay, what's up with Regan? What's up with Regan? Because obviously whatever this is really weird. So basically they're convinced that it's something psychological because Chris and her husband recently got divorced, so they think that Regan's sudden whatever is caused by like some emotional displacement from the divorce, I guess. Which, I mean, it's called The Exorcist. It's clearly a demonic possession, but okay, I guess the story needs to happen. So anyway, one day, Sharon is out getting some medication for Regan. She's prescribed Librium, so they need to get that. And then Chris is out talking with the doctors about stuff. So Burke Dennings is left home alone with Regan, And upon Sharon and Chris's return, they find that Burke Dennings has been found dead on the back stairs, or on these stairs, with his head twisted around. And so this detective guy named Kinderman, he's starting to investigate. He's like, what's going on here? Because he probably either walked out drunk and got hit by something, or maybe he did it to himself or something, or what. But the head twisted around part is really weird. So, that goes on for a while. Carl is like the main suspect, who, as I said, is one of Chris' main assistants. So that's like a plot thread for a little bit. But so anyway, the doctors realize that there's really nothing that they can do for Regan anymore. And they talk to Chris about getting a priest to see if they can do anything about a demonic possession. And remember, as I said, everyone is kind of not convinced it's a demonic possession. Even the main priest, and his name is like either Karas or Karis or Karis or something. I just thought of him as Karas the entire story, so I'll just say Karas. But if you say Karis or Karis, that's cool too. I don't know the actual pronunciation. But anyway, this Karas guy, he left his mother alone to die so that he could join the priesthood and stuff, and he's kind of having some trouble with his faith, I guess you could say. So he's kind of dealing with that. And one day he's approached by Chris, who tells him, all of Regan's symptoms, and she's like, do you think it could be a demonic possession? And he's like, well, it's always possible, but we kind of don't do exorcisms anymore, because ever since we found out like what mental health is and all that, we kind of put demons on like the back burner and just started explaining it as mental health stuff. So even the priest, who should know about demonic possession and stuff, is convinced that everything that happens is just, part of psychological stuff. So then we spend an unnatural amount of time just thinking that it's just like psychological trauma and stuff instead of actual demonic possession. Which is so weird, because Karas goes to the McNeil house many times, literally talks to the demon inside of Regan, finds out that it is a demon, and then he goes back to Chris, is like, yeah, it says it's a demon, but I think it's just psychological issues. It's like, come on, dude, it's just a demon. It's just a demon. It should not take you 250 pages to realize that it could be a demon. Oh yeah, it takes like 250 pages to realize that it's a demon, by the way. At least in this edition it is. I don't know why it takes so long either. But anyway, so after an unnatural amount of time, over 250 pages in, Karas finally thinks, okay, maybe it is a possession. But the thing is that the church is very hard to convince of a demonic possession, so you have to have like undeniable proof. So he's like thinking, okay, even if this is a demon, I'm going to need like actual proof to show to the church. And so he eventually does get that actual proof by having a tape recorder of both Regan's voice and Demon Regan's voice, and they're not the same, but they're in the same body, so that's weird. So he gives it to the church, and then they approve it right away. So that was just kind of weird to me, because, the entire book, it's been building up that the church is very hard to convince about a demonic possession, so I thought that there would be like at least a little bit of a minor plot thread about him trying to get permission to get an exorcism. But nope, he just turns in the evidence and gets permission to perform an exorcism right away. But the church doesn't want him to do it alone. They want him to do it with a professional, so they send in this other guy, whose name I've forgotten, unfortunately, but he's like the other main exorcist of this. So they go over to Regan's house for a couple days, and then they just say like rituals, like biblical rituals, while splashing holy water on the demon's body and just trying to exorcise the demon that way. But it's not working, and days go by and stuff is just not working. So anyway, Kinderman decides to arrive back into the story again and talk to Karas. So while Karas is doing stuff, they just, talk about whatever, like movies and stuff. And then when Karas returns, he finds that the other exorcist guy has actually been killed by the demon. So what he does is like, hey demon, you're a coward. you want someone to come into me so we can talk like men and stuff. So the demon's like, oh, absolutely. So basically, Pazuzu the demon, the statue at the beginning, goes from Regan's body into Karas's body, and then we hear a window breaking and then a thud on the ground. So everyone goes back up to the main room, finds the priest dead, the window shattered, and Karas seems to have been like just destroyed on the stairs, the same place where Burke Dennings has been destroyed. Oh yeah, by the way, in case you're wondering, Burke has been killed by Demon Regan. She twisted his head around and then threw his body out of the open window. So that explains that. But anyway, so as Karas is taken away in an ambulance, Father Dyer, who's like one of the main church people, follows along with him. And then in the final minutes of the story, Regan, Chris, and all their assistants go back to California where they're actually from, because I guess the movie's either not happening or they finished filming or whatever. And then Kinderman and this other guy meet up, and they walk off together like at the end of Casablanca. And that is how The Exorcist ends. So that was like the main stuff about The Exorcist. As you may notice, I did kind of glaze over a lot of things because either I didn't remember or they were just so weird that I just didn't even bother to include them in like the main summary because they were just not important at all. But I think I got every single one of the major things. If I haven't, I'm sure some of you will remind me in the comments, to which I apologize in advance for missing anything important. But yeah, that was my summary of The Exorcist. I actually had a really hard time reading it for a variety of factors. First of all, I thought the book would be more about an exorcism than it actually was. I'm not saying that the exorcism being at the end was a bad thing. I'm just saying that a lot of the book is like, no, she's probably just having psychological issues rather than a demon possession. And then most of the book is like that versus an actual like, okay, we got to get permission from the church to exorcise. We got to find an exorcist and we got to perform the exorcism. Instead of like mostly about the exorcism, it's mostly about trying to find evidence of the demonic possession, which I guess some people would like, but it certainly caught me off guard because I wasn't expecting that. So anyway, I mean, The Exorcist, it's not a bad book. I certainly sound a little pessimistic towards it because, as I said, I just didn't know what to expect. So this is definitely a book I will have to give a reread one day because I do believe that the book is incredible. I just didn't think it was incredible on the first go around, but I did like it. So don't think that I didn't like it. It was just certainly something that I did not expect, and that unexpectedness kind of lowered it in quality for me. But I do not think that the book is bad. I do think that William Peter Blatty, I don't know if he was like into demonic possession or whatever, but whatever he did when he wasn't a writer, he certainly did a good job at it because there is so much like medical accuracy and history in there. It's like when exorcism stopped, the science behind exorcism, the science behind like traumatic memories and stuff. It's like there's so much just stuff in there that's like medically related. It's kind of like Moby Dick in a way, actually, because like Moby Dick right here is actually like a guide on whales and whale anatomy and stuff. And so The Exorcist is kind of like a guide on medicine and modern day exorcisms and stuff, which I thought was really cool. So anyway, yeah, The Exorcist is not a bad book, but it will definitely have to be a reread because now that I know what to expect, I will definitely go into it with a more like knowing frame of mind. And another reason I will say that it took me so long to finish it, by the way, I'm sorry that it took me 12 days to finish it. I really wanted to finish it faster. But the edition I have, it's like an olive edition. That's what it's called. Yeah, Perennial Olive Edition. I don't know what this is. I don't know if it's like abridged or anything, but the audiobooks I found on YouTube did kind of follow along with it. Just either like skipped over things, put descriptions in other places than where they were in this book, or just whatever. But I couldn't use an audiobook for this because the audiobook and this were just so different. And that's just because this edition is so weird. As I said, I don't know if it's like an abridged edition or what it is. But either way, it was certainly hard to follow along with an audiobook, so I just had to use like my regular mind to read it. And so I will definitely have to look into an actual like more known copy, because I've never heard of an olive copy, and it looks like that YouTube hasn't either. So I will definitely have to find another copy of The Exorcist, like on Amazon or whatever, with like a more traditional cover and hopefully a more traditional prose in it. But yeah, so yeah, my unenjoyment, or at least most of my unenjoyment from this book, came from that edition. But I do believe that The Exorcist is a really good book. And as I said, I have not seen the movie yet, but I know that the movie is incredible, at least from what I've heard. I've also heard that the movie is a slow burn, and I guess the same is for the book as well, because the book is very much a slow burn. Well, it's actually kind of weird, because like there's something that's really interesting, and then it gets kind of boring, and then it gets interesting, and then it's boring, and then it just like goes on that roller coaster for the entire book. So yeah, certainly towards the ending it's very action-packed and enjoying and stuff, but like a lot of the medical discussion, if you're not into medicine like I'm not, you're probably going to be bored by that. But if you're just a casual reader, there's a lot of scenes where it gets really interesting, and then it gets uninteresting really fast, and then, vice versa. So yeah, I mean, The Exorcist, I like it, but I definitely need to read it again to fully appreciate it, like I'm sure a lot of you do. And I look forward to watching the movie as well, and seeing how the movie compares. But yeah, so go read The Exorcist, I guess. But yeah, guys, that is the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Be sure to like and subscribe if you have not. Please leave a like under the video. And please subscribe to my YouTube channel. We are still on the road to 300, so let's get to that road. So let's stay on that road and get to 300 very soon. But anyway, in the meantime, I've been Mr. BG, and this has been BG's Books. And remember,
there is no Mr. BG, only Pazuzu.
The power of Christ compels you. The power of Christ compels you.